Okay, so let's look at this example. So they're telling us that we've got a train, and it's scheduled to run a distance of 160 kilometers between two cities. Okay, and they're also telling us that on its way back, if the average speed is decreased by 16 kilometers per hour, then it will take half an hour longer than it ordinarily would have. So it would be really good to stress this point, right? Speed times time is equal to distance, right? Kilometers per hour times hours. The hours will cancel out and we'll get a distance, right? An amount. So for a problem like this, it would be useful to set up equations, right? That match the information that's provided. So why don't we let x denote the speed of the train, right? We could use s, but we could use x or y or whatever. So x times some amount of time, we don't know, is equal to a distance that is given, right? 160 kilometers, okay? The problem with this equation alone is that we've got two variables, right? Two variables in one equation. We can't possibly determine one value or solve for the other. So we're going to have to set up a second equation, okay? So how do we do that? Well, we do note that when the train is going on its way back, its speed is decreased by 16 kilometers per hour. So that would mean this, x minus 16 kilometers per hour, right? Times not the same amount of time, but a different time. So we could use t sub 1 and t sub 2, right? But t sub 2 is essentially very close to this time, but just half of an hour longer, right? So we could write this as t plus 1/2 is equal to the same distance, right? It doesn't travel any more or any less. Okay, well, here's the issue is that we've got two variables in one equation here. We've got two variables in one equation here. And so we're not interested in finding out this t or that t. We're interested in finding what x is, right? So why don't we use substitution? Okay, let's take a look at this equation here. And why don't we divide both sides by x, right? So we have t is equal to 160 divided by x, okay? And so what we're going to do is we're going to take this t, right, 160 over x, and we're going to substitute it right into here, okay? So our equation will become x minus 16 times 160 divided by x plus 1 over 2 is equal to 160. Okay, so now all we need to do is distribute, collect like terms, and then, if possible, solve for x. Well, it should be, obviously, right? So we're going to do this term times this term right here. So x times 160 over x, the x's will cancel out. And we will, of course, have just 160, okay? Then we're going to have x times this 1/2, okay? And so that will just leave us with x over 2, okay? So plus x over 2, all right? And then we're going to do this term times this term, right? And so we will have plus 2,560 divided by x, okay? And then we're going to do this term times, minus, there we go. Minus 2,560 over x, and then we do the last, negative 16 times positive 1/2. Well, that's just going to be negative 8. This is equal to 160. And so we can collect like terms. We can see that we've got 160 here, and we've got 160 here, so they're going to cancel out, right? We can subtract 160 from both sides. So what we're going to have is x over 2 minus 2,560 divided by x minus 8 is equal to 0. And so, yeah, we've got a rational equation. So why don't we multiply both sides by well, we've got a 2 down here, we have an x down here, so our lowest common denominator is 2x. Okay, so let's take this here, multiply it by 2x. Let's take this, multiply it by 2x. Let's take this, right? Multiply it by 2x. Okay, so what do we get? Well, these 2's will cancel out, and we're going to get x squared. Okay, if I do 2x times this, the x's will cancel out. Okay, and we will have 5,120. Okay, and then if I do 2x times 8, we're going to have negative 16x is equal to 0. And we can move this around, okay? We can write this as x squared minus 16x minus 5,120 equal to 0. And this is actually something we can factor. We can factor this into x minus 80 times x plus 64 equal to 0, because they differ by negative 16, right? If you don't want to factor it, and maybe this one is a little bit difficult to factor, you can always use the quadratic formula, right? If you do negative b, so negative 16 is positive 16, right? Plus or minus the square root of negative 16 squared, minus 4 times a times negative 5,120 divided by, there we go, I'm holding the camera with one hand, so it's kind of hard to secure this page, all over 2. You'll get the first root. The first root will be equal to 80, and the second will be equal to negative 64. And of course, this is in terms of kilometers per hour. So we can see that x equal to negative 64 is going to be an extraneous root, and so our solution is x equal to 80 kilometers per hour. Okay.